what's going on, party people? Phantom here, and welcome to another episode of Random Access Memories. The format to RAM is simple, as I have mentioned in previous episodes, in where I take a game and I talk a little bit about the history, and then dive into different random memories that I have from that game. The memories can be something specific, or just things that I remember in general about the game. There's no real specific format, but the point is to bring up some nostalgia from my younger years and hopefully stir up those random access memories that you might have sitting dormant in your mind as well. So enough intro, let's get on with the episode. With the release of Doom in 1993, it's debated within the gaming community that it was the game that kickstarted the first-person shooter revolution on the PC. Unfortunately, with the success of Doom, there came to be a lot of Doom clones. These games were not so good, and then there were some that were good, and then there were some that were just pretty terrible. While the PC community was thriving in regards to first-person shooters as well as other games, the console market wasn't nearly as populated with these first-person shooters. Although games like Crash Bandicoot 2, Final Fantasy VII, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and Star Fox 64 were either on the consoles already or in the process of being released over the course of the year, there just wasn't any real first-person shooter to take the console market by storm. Well, that is until Rare stepped in and created Goldeneye. You know, it's kind of interesting that every time I sit down to write a script for Random Access Memories, I end up coming across a game designed by Rare, and I don't even think about it until after the fact. Even funnier still is the fact that this episode covers a game that just had its 20-year anniversary, and I didn't even know that until I actually started sitting down to write for this episode. So sometimes things just happen to work out that way. So just like they did with Donkey Kong Country, which just so happens to be another episode of RAM, and you can click the annotation or down below to find that episode, Rare sought to make it just a good game and ended up turning the genre right on its head. Goldeneye was originally developed by an unexperienced team over the course of about 2 years, which is really shocking when you think of how good the game was, and was originally supposed to be designed as an on-rail shooter like Virtua Cop. The dev team eventually abandoned this idea to go for an open world-like structure that is seen in the final game. Goldeneye is considered to be one of the best games ever made for the console or PC, and was the third best-selling N64 game of all time, and has numerous accolades since its release. For me, when I think about Goldeneye, the first thing that comes to my mind is the multiplayer. While some retrospective shows on YouTube might end up immediately talking about graphics, the single-player component, music, or what have you, and we will eventually get to those in just a moment, the thing that stands out in my mind, bar none, is the split-screen multiplayer. I can remember sitting down in front of a TV with 4 friends, 4 controllers, and a cramped view, and just having the time of my life, even if it was running at 15 to 20 frames per second, because there's so much crap going on screen. It was just still good fun. You could chalk this up to the fact that online gaming wasn't really a thing back then, but couch co-op and couch multiplayer was definitely king at the time. From the different game modes that let you use the golden gun as an instant kill, to the fact that you had to outlaw people using characters like Oddjob because you just couldn't hit that little bastard, to the gun game and the overall level design, the multiplayer was just flat out fun, and I have a lot of exciting and fun memories stemming from that. Moving away from the multiplayer component, you have the single-player component, which was comprised of multiple levels and multiple different ways you had to complete said level. At the time, I'd never seen anything like it, and you could probably chalk that up to the fact that I didn't get a whole lot of time on the PC back then, but it still blew my mind back in 1997 to have different branching structures in a console shooter. Having trouble on some of the easier settings, and then having to go back and see that I had to do even more under a different, harder setting was both frustrating and fun at the same time. The game itself loosely follows the theatrical movie Goldeneye, and ultimately does a good job involving most of the characters and sticking to the plot relatively well. There were times that I was sitting on my couch and I could think of, where the heck did that happen in the movie? but then also geeking out when I was able to climb into the tank, just like the movie. While not as epic as the tank chase in the actual movie, it was still cool to do nonetheless. My favorite level has to be the satellite level, which is at the end of the game. Spoiler alert if you never played Goldeneye or seen the movie, but you are being chased by 006, also known as Alec, on a large satellite antenna just like in the climax of the movie. You finally reach the last part, and you see the characters act out the last scene where 006 says, "For England, James?" And then James Bond says, "No, Alec, for me." And then 006 falls to his death while you get to jump onto a helicopter just like in the movie. Even though following the movie is a neat aspect of a movie tie-in game, the thing that I can randomly remember in the single player was all the different cheats you could unlock. Stuff that we don't see anymore like big head mode and slow motion are all present alongside many other cheats that were only recently being found a few years ago. Slow motion was one of my favorites mainly because if you had it turned on and you were playing at the end of the game, the helicopter moved at normal speed, but James Bond was going so slow that he jumps, and he's going so dang excessively slow that the helicopter takes off screen and he just jumps to his death. It was always one of my favorite parts and always made me laugh. Unlike Donkey Kong, where the soundtrack was outstanding, there's not really much here to remember just outside of the normal James Bond theme song that plays at the beginning of the game. It's iconic for sure, but it's not because of the game itself, it's because it comes from James Bond. Graphically for the time, it was nothing that I had really ever seen on console or controlled on a console, and that's something that I definitely remember. Using the N64's analog stick, you could move and strafe in full analog movement, and with a click of a button, you could aim and headshot enemies from across the map with extreme precision. Being that a lot of the shooters at the time were just point towards the enemy and shoot, this was something that I can remember being very interesting and something that I really wanted to sink my teeth into. I enjoyed this style of control so much that when games moved to dual analog for controlling first-person shooters, I had a really hard time making the transition. And with the current state of the console shooter and the PC shooter, it's really hard to go back to a game like Goldeneye on the Nintendo 64, but luckily we have remakes on the PC that allow us old guys to go back and relive the glory days of 007. So for Goldeneye on the Nintendo 64, I will always have memories of that game, and I will always be able to randomly access them. Thanks for stopping by, and if you liked what you saw or heard, please subscribe to the channel for future videos, and if not, at least thank you for stopping by. Links to previous episodes of RAM can be found in the description down below, alongside of videos and music used in this episode. Until next time, this is Phantom, and I'll see you guys around.